Hello and welcome to the Atoll, your home for Waterworld fandom. In today's special video, we'll be continuing our adventure with part 3 of 4 of the Waterworld audiobook novelization. In the previous video in this series, we ended with the Deacon in his headquarters on the D's, questioning the smoker pilot about the location of the mariner Helen and Enola. So, let's now travel back to the D's and rejoin the Deacon as he and the Nord plot their next move to capture our companions aboard the trimaran.
The Deacon, pulling the pilot along with him, joined his second-in-command at a conference table, where antique charts were spread out. The Nord was working out speed-distance computations on one of them. "Show me," the Deacon said. The pilot pointed to a spot on the chart. "From here." "Good. Now get some rest." And he shoved the pilot away, nodding to a smoker guard to haul the pitiful creature out of his sight. The Deacon stabbed a finger at the chart. "I say she's headed here." The Deacon stabbed the chart again at another point. "Which means we'll take him here." And the two men exchanged satisfied smiles. Its sails in tatters, the trimaran limped along courtesy of a breeze from the west-southwest. The mariner had made all the repairs he could with what little he had to do them with. He walked to the woman and child sitting on the deck, and they recoiled in fear as he walked by. Women. What had he ever done to them? Then he noticed a dot on the horizon. He unsheathed his telescope and had a look. A trawler, smaller than his, was piloted by a scruffy bearded drifter who was waving at him, smiling, pointing upward, to the green flag atop his mast. The woman was suddenly beside him. "Just some drifter," he said. "Doesn't that flag mean he wants to trade?" "Yes." "Aren't we stopping?" "No." "Maybe he has food," she said. "You know, the child isn't like you. She needs to eat every day." He looked at his sorry ship and wondered if stopping to trade with the drifter wasn't worth the risk. "We may not see another boat for days," she was saying. He glared and said, "Sit down and shut up." She did. Before long, the mariner was securing the trimaran, where the drifter's boat was pulled up. "Nice to run into somebody who still follows the rules," the drifter said. "You don't find many who honor the code these days." "Make it quick," the mariner said. "What business do you have in mind?" "What else?" "Barter." "Got any sail?" The drifter eyed the trimaran and snorted derisively. "You ain't got enough to tempt me." "I had enough for you to raise a flag." From behind the mariner came that nagging voice again. "How about food?" He glared at the woman. "Food," the drifter said. "Great idea. I haven't eaten in 2 days. What do you got?" Her smile fell. But the drifter's smile only got bigger as he took in her womanly shape. "You the cook? Or maybe the waitress?" "Waitress is always my favorite food." She shivered. The drifter was shopping, casting his gaze around the deck of the trimaran. "Like you said," the mariner conceded, "I don't have much." But the drifter's eyes again landed on the woman. He looked her up and down greedily. "What do you want for the females?" the drifter asked. "We're not for sale," the woman almost shouted, hugging the child to her. "I'm not buying, darling," the drifter said. "I'm trading, and everything's up for barter in Waterworld." "They a pair?" the drifter asked. "Or would you consider selling them separate?" "We need to move on," the mariner said. "How about just rental?" The mariner thought about that. "You got sail or resin you can part with?" "I told you already," the drifter said. "I don't have any to spare. Haven't seen neither for trade in lunars." "We're finished then." The drifter's eyes glinted. "I got something else that'll change your mind, though." Reaching inside his tattered shirt, the drifter withdrew a small sealed bottle. Within were a few pages from an ancient magazine. Writing and pictures both. Took it off some Atoll refugees, the drifter said. Don't do it, the woman said. It wasn't a demand, but a plea. The mariner extended his hand, and the drifter filled that hand with the bottle. 1/2 an hour, the mariner said. No, Helen gasped. 1/2 an hour, the drifter said, frowning. Don't do this, the woman said softly. Shut up, he told her. I'd just soon take the little one. The other one talks too much. The mariner shook his head. You can't afford the child. 1/2 an hour with a woman. Please, Helen said. But he silenced her with a look. She knew she had no choice. Come on, the drifter called to Helen. She began to move forward, but the mariner blocked her with an arm. My boat, the mariner said. Fair enough, the drifter said. The woman headed toward the hatchway door of the recessed cabin, and the drifter, licking his lips greedily, followed after her. Enola began to follow as well. Sit down, the mariner told the girl. Without looking back, the woman said, Enola, do like he says. Then the drifter slammed the cabin door. Helen faced the drifter in the cramped cabin. Don't take him off, he said, nodding to her tunic. For what I paid, I'm going to rip him. No need to get rough. I'm not going to fight as long as you... Shut up! You might as well know. I plan on taking the little one, too. She grabbed a breath that might have turned into a scream, but the hatchway door yanked open and the trimaran's captain dropped into the cabin. His eyes were wild. Trade's off, he said. The drifter snarled. What? Why? I changed my mind. She moved quickly, getting behind her unlikely savior. You can't do that. Her champion tossed the bottle with its precious pages to the drifter. I just did. The drifter tossed the bottle aside and filled his hand with a gleaming knife. Well, I'm sorry, the drifter said, but I got my needs, and I won't take no for an answer. Get out, he told Helen. Then the cabin door slammed shut, and Helen ran to Enola, clutching the trembling child as the sounds of a terrible battle below deck shook the trimaran. She searched around deck until she found a double-barrel spear gun. It was loaded. Good. Then she turned toward the hatch as it opened, and the drifter crawled out. It had been a losing battle for the drifter, carved up by his own knife. The drifter flopped to the deck, very dead. They watched as the mariner kicked the corpse of the drifter over the side. Come on, he said. Help me. With the three of us pitching in, we can strip that sorry bastard's boat clean in no time. Plundering the drifter's boat gave the captain of the trimaran what he needed to make minimal repairs. But the drifter hadn't been lying when he said there was no food. Helen sat trying to fix a broken fishing reel. Suddenly he reached down, plucked the broken reel from her hand, and tossed it overboard. Enola frowned. Why did you do that? Helen touched the child's arm. Enola, please, leave him alone. Why does he act that way? Enola asked. I know he likes us. He spared us, Helen said. That doesn't mean he likes us. He likes us, the child insisted. I wish I knew his name. I don't think he has one. I have one for him. What? Mariner. It means sailor, the child said. Actually, Helen said, I think it means more than that. A sailor comes home to port, but a mariner, he lives out on the sea. It's his home. The child was nodding. It's a good name for him. You can use it too. And from then on, that's how Helen thought of him. A growling emerged from the child's stomach, and Helen stroked her cheek. Helen moved gingerly over to him. Please, we don't want to make you angry, but if you just give me something to fish with, I'll catch them myself. Not in these waters, he said. We are hungry, she said. The child is hungry. You don't understand what fishing is like around here. From behind them, Enola's voice chimed. Maybe he doesn't know how to fish. He shook his head in disgust and stormed away, leaping into the recess of the cabin. He emerged with a strange-looking two-headed harpoon gun. Eyes burning, face flushed with anger, he was fastening a long coil of rusty wire to his trawling mechanism at the stern. "What's he doing, Helen?" "I'm not sure." Now he was securing the other end of the wire around the middle of the harpoon gun, and the mariner, harpoon gun clutched in both hands, threw himself off the stern of the slowly moving boat. Hanging onto the harpoon gun, he lay face down on the surface of the foaming water, allowing himself to be dragged along behind the boat. Helen and Enola could only hear sounds when his head was above water, but the mariner was emitting strange squeaks as he skimmed along. Suddenly he began spinning on the end of the wire. Helen frowned. Like a lure. Rupturing the surface of the sea, a huge blue creature burst into view with impossibly huge jaws, ringed with pointy, razor-sharp teeth that opened in a yawning oblong entry to hell. Enola clutched Helen, and both she and the child gasped, their eyes frozen on the sight of the beast swallowing the mariner in one gulp, snapping the trawling wire. "No!" the child screamed. Helen, as confused as she was frightened, soothed the girl. The beast had not submerged. Then a tearing, thunking sound emerged from within the beast, and so did a harpoon, right out of the side of its grotesque head. Then a second ripping thunk announced the other harpoon's exit from the other side of the now dying beast. Soon a knife blade was emerging from the area by the jaws as the mariner began cutting himself an exit from his catch of the day. By late afternoon, Helen was cooking enormous whalefin steaks on a small grill salvaged from the late drifter's boat. The mariner, returning from cutting from the huge carcass as many steaks as they figured would keep for a few days, sat and waited as the fresh smoky fragrance wafted enticingly up. Gentle singing, the child's, floated on the breeze. "There is a girl that lives in the wind," she sang. In the wind there is." The mariner looked up sharply at the girl. She stopped. "Don't you like my singing?" He didn't say anything. "Helen says you don't like my singing," the child said, "because you can't sing yourself." "Enola," Helen said. The mariner said, "You ever stop and just listen?" Enola seemed puzzled. "To what?" "To the music of Waterworld." The child cocked her head. "I don't hear anything." "That's because you're too loud," he said. "Try sitting still for a change." She frowned. It was as close to a pout as Helen had ever seen Enola come. The mariner must have noticed it too, because he made a peace offering. He went over to the pile of steaks he had cut, then returned holding out his palm. "You can have one." In his hands were two large eyeballs, formerly the property of the whalefin. The child recoiled, her face distorted with horror as he took one of the eyeballs and squeezed its juice into his mouth. "Don't know what you're missing," he said. Helen couldn't bring herself to take one either. Then he shocked them both by pushing his water jug toward them. "Drink all you want," he said. "It's going to rain tonight." Enola was staring at the foot. "I wish I had feet like yours," she said. The mariner just looked at the child. "Then maybe I could swim," Enola said. After supper, a contented Helen curled up for a nap. Soon she was sleeping soundly. A nonspecific sound stirred her half awake. She was just drifting off again when the sound repeated. A scream. She sat up, flashing looks around the deck. No sign of Enola, or the mariner for that matter. Another scream, Enola's scream, sent Helen to her feet. Out on the crimson gold water, the mariner was swimming easily on his back, and Enola was gleefully sitting on his chest, riding along. The screams had been squeals of pleasure. For the next hour she watched as their gruff captain gave the child a swimming lesson. Later on deck, Helen remembered the scrap of cloth in her hand and said, We wanted to thank you." He just looked at her. "For everything, but we don't even know your name." "I don't have one." It was a matter of fact, simply stated. "I never needed one," he added. She brought the scrap of cloth from around her back. I have something for you, she said. It's just a scrap of cloth, a rag. Rags are useful. Well, I hope you won't use this one. She held it up, showing the crudely charming sketch Enola had done of the three of them on the deck of the trimaran together. Enola wanted to give you this, but she was afraid to. He didn't say anything, but he reached out and took the rag from her. Oh, and here, she said, and handed him the crayon the girl had used to make the drawing. I took it away from her. She won't do it again. Now he was looking at her. Finally he said, The marks on her back. What are they? Nothing, she said. They must mean something, the mariner said. Somebody put them there. She lowered her eyes. You don't look much like her, unless she takes after her father, he said. I'm not her mother. About 6 years ago, she said quietly, a basket floated into Oasis with a child in it. A baby. Enola, he said. She nodded. Everyone wanted to push her back out to sea. That was the law of the elders, but I said I'd take her. She was so precious, and I had some position in the atoll with my store, so they listened to me. But they said if I wanted her so badly, I could never bear a child myself. She would have to be my one and only child. But the child wasn't of the atoll. No, she wasn't. And there was no one else who wanted her. She would have died otherwise. He just shrugged and tended the tiller. She gazed out at the water. When will we get to dry land? Tomorrow, maybe, he said. Day after at most. Here. He handed the crayon back to her. I'm not giving it to the child, understand, it's just alone. He nodded. Is dry land beautiful? She asked. You'll see, soon enough. The spire-shaped tower jutted from the horizon like a massive deformed tree. Viewing this through binoculars, Helen frowned. What was this place? Barter outpost, he said casually. I need canvas. We have canvas, Helen said. We got canvas off that drifter's boat. But he didn't reply. Something wasn't right. She was about to question him more pointedly when she noticed that his expression seemed troubled as well. She studied him as he veered off, apparently buying a little more time before docking. What do you see? She asked. The traders in the tower are waving, he said. Then he shouted a greeting. No words came back. What language did you use? She asked. Portugreek, he said. That's what they talk in these waters. She plucked the binoculars from his hand and had another look. She could see the traders waving, yes, but there was something odd about it, something wrong. Then she swung her view down to the bobbing box-like structures and saw that they were cages. Slaves. Fear clutched her chest. Lowering the binocular, she said, It's a slave colony. He didn't reply. Was this a surprise to him, too? Or, and the thought chilled her thoroughly, had he brought her and Enola here to sell them? The slave traders in the spiral tower were waving at the mariner and his trimaran, all right. But they had help. They needed it. They were dead, slain by their puppet masters behind them, working them like corpse marionettes. While his smokers waved the dead men's arms, the Deacon stood on a pile of dead slaver bodies, giving him access to a spy hole in the tower wall, which he poked his telescope through. Ah, the Deacon said. There's my girl. The mariner moved to the edge of the ship. The woman trailed after him, saying, Why did you bring us here? Quiet, he said, and leaned out to have a look overboard. The water gleamed with the faint but telltale iridescence of oil, a sure sign of Goju's boat, and a strong indication of smokers. The mariner moved to the starboard hull where he ducked below deck, removed a floorboard, and exposed a wet well open to the water below. Nearby was his portable periscope, which he thrust into the wet well. At first all he saw was water. Then, jarringly close, he peered into the hideous face of a begoggled, breathing tubes-up-the-nose smoker. Bursting topside, the mariner ran to the cockpit and leapt into place, blowing the jib, bringing the mainsail around. The swinging boom damn near decapitated the woman. "Hey!" Helen screamed. "What the hell is—" "Smokers!" he yelled. From the slaver tower, a commanding voice rippled across the water. "Sound it! Sound it! Sound it!" And the blare of the horn could be heard on the trimaran deck as jet skis came roaring, leaping out of the water. On the prow of the ship, the child was trying to make her way back, but she lost her footing. The mariner had no time to save her, but the woman shouted out, "Get down and hold on to something!" And the girl hunkered down, gripping the prow with tight, tiny fingers. Meantime, he had found his wind and was making a run. But with smokers popping up on both his flanks, he knew the noose would soon tighten into a death grip. He tacked hard, veering away. She streaked to the main hull, shooting below deck. Grabbing a line, the mariner swung around the stern. He could hear her working the speed crank in the forward cabin below. He called to the woman, "Starboard now!" As he did, he caught sight of a berserker on a jet ski bearing in on the prow. He was reaching for the girl, who was goggle-eyed with fright. "Duck!" the mariner yelled. She did. And still, leaning out to snatch her, the berserker slammed into the trimaran's prow at full speed, shattering a forward crossarm and vanishing beneath the boat and water. The woman emerged topside, and following the mariner and his instructions, climbed the starboard hike-out ladder. Adding her weight, and the port hull began rising off the water. When they shifted their weight back again, the boat slammed down on the water, outside the tightening noose. Then both of them, breathing hard, made their way back to the starboard hull, and he pulled in the ladder. "You walked us out of that trap," she said, amazed. Jumping back in his cockpit, he kicked open the hatch that would give him the raw speed he needed now. A pedal was revealed, and he slammed his foot on it, firing the foredeck air mortar, and his emergency ace in the hull went rocketing over the head of the startled child on the hull. "Spinnaker," he said. The triangular box kite headsail gave them just the burst they needed. The smokers were suddenly far behind them. The battle was over. Then a spear burst through the mariner's shoulder. He whipped his head toward the source of the pain and saw the berserker who had rammed into the prow. The bastard was under the ship, clinging to the deck netting, and on his ugly head he wore a 2-shot mounted spear gun helmet. And there was 1 shot left on that helmet rig. With his unwounded arm, the mariner grabbed a harpoon from a cockpit scabbard and jammed it straight down into the berserker. The berserker dropped away, a moment of frothy red foam announcing his departure on the water's surface. "Keep the course," he told the woman, and staggered off to try to remove the damn spear. On the stern hull he collapsed, passing out, his blood trickling down into the water as the trimaran skimmed along. The Deacon stood atop his pile of human rubble, looking at the very disappointing outcome of his well-crafted plan to ambush the trimaran. He raised the telescope to his eye. He could see the fishman, apparently unconscious on the stern hull. "I think we've wounded him," the Deacon said. "Unleash the tracker sharks." And very soon, the wire mesh centerboard of an underwater cage opened as tracker sharks nosed out, circling the water, the scent of blood driving them mad. Then they knifed away. Leaving the wheel lashed and closed hull, as she had seen him do, Helen moved across the netting deck. "Can I help?" she asked him. "Get away," he snarled. "You lied to us," she said. "You were going to sell us back there." "We both lied," he grunted. "You said the markings on the child's back didn't mean anything. You lied." I don't know what they mean." Then he said, "Those smokers are after the girl. That's what the ambush was all about." "You're crazy." He jerked a thumb at the speared shoulder. "I got this from a smoker that lost his life trying to grab her. Why do they want her? What do those markings mean?" And he yanked the spear from his shoulder, turning his face into a mask of agony that immediately fused his fury as he stood, filling his hand with a machete lying unsecured on the deck. Blood streaming from a wounded shoulder, his good hand filled with the big menacing blade, he pointed it threateningly at her. "Now, what are the marks on that child's back?" She didn't believe he'd use it, but she didn't exactly believe he wouldn't either. Then she heard herself say, "People think it charts the way to dry land." He slumped, the machete lowering. "Dry land's a myth." "It's not," she blurted. "You said so yourself. You said you knew where it was. You said you were taking us there." "I'm a liar. Remember?" Then he fell to his knees and passed out from the pain. When he woke, the pain had subsided somewhat. Kneeling next to him, the woman offered him his water jug, and he gulped a drink. "Why didn't you kill me?" he asked. "You could have." "I need you alive," she said. "I can't captain this boat." "You've learned a lot quickly," he granted her. "But you're a fool, believing in something you've never seen." Her eyes glittered, and her smile was childlike. "But I have seen it. You've seen dry land." "I've touched it." The fingers of one hand clutched at the air and turned into a trembling fist. "In these hands I've held and touched and savored dirt far richer and darker than what you traded back at the Atoll." He sat up straighter. "Where?" "It was in the basket," she said. "The basket we found Enola in." So that was the ground her hope was built on. Poor woman. "There is no dry land," he said softly. "It doesn't exist." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've sailed farther than most have dreamed, and I've never seen it." "But the things on this boat." "What things?" "The things no one in Waterworld has ever seen. Shells in your hair, reflecting glass. If not dry land, where did they come from?" "So you want to see dry land," he said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Her eyes were almost crazed. "Of course!" "Then I'll show it to you." At the stern of the boat, a bell-shaped, wire-caged salvage rig bobbed, half-submerged in the water. She watched the mariner attaching tethered weights, jury-rigging a large jellyfish-like membrane to a tube connected to a gas canister fastened to the rig. She had helped him assemble the cage. The trimaran was back in trawler mode, its windmill sail churning. The mariner had ducked back under the deck again, emerging with a handful of tubes. "What are those?" she asked. "Flares," he said. The word meant nothing to her, until he brought them one by one to fiery spark-spitting life, pitching them underwater. Now he was down in the water, calling up to her. "Get in!" Enola said to Helen, "I want to go too." "There's only air for one," he yelled up. "Get in the water now." She flashed a sorry look to the child, and Helen splashed in beside the mariner. "Get in the bell," he said. And she dove below, and steering herself up through and within the wire mesh framework, finding the opening of the air bladder, surfacing inside of it. It began to balloon around her, sealed off below her, and suddenly she was encased in a bubble-like bladder, and there was air to breathe. She could see him out there, needing no air, requiring no breathing apparatus other than those gills behind his ears. "Okay," he mouthed. The mariner kept one hand locked in the wire mesh of the rig, riding along on the downward journey. Inside her transparent bubble, Helen looked out as jellyfish and other sea denizens swam across her line of vision. The rig had descended to a depth where the sunlight no longer could filter down its rays, yet there were orbs of light. As the rig dropped deeper, she realized what the orbs were. Fire sticks, the flare still tumbling down slowly like glowing pink lanterns. Still falling, the rig overtook the flares, and they entered a murky twilight. And then the cage rocked to a stop, resting on something dark. And before long the flares caught up with them, tumbling down to settle their light upon a vista that made her gasp. It was the wondrously jagged underwater skyline of a centuries-old city. And Helen, in her bubble, was poised at the edge of a rooftop. Beyond her was the mind-boggling array of what were called skyscrapers. Only they no longer scraped the sky, but reached like square stone fingers into the ocean above. The mariner tugged the cage off the roof, and they tumbled down for what seemed an eternity. With a water-cushioned clang, the cage landed on bottom, street level, and here the flares revealed incredible images. Seaweed danced before a huge building labeled First National Bank. Moray eels swam in and out of glassless windows of a municipal bus line's vehicle. Street lamps stood, draped with kelp vehicles, cars, the magazines called them, or automobiles, sat rusted and encrusted. In the window of what must have been a store, Nordstrom's, a figure of a woman, naked but smooth and unfinished, wore a necklace of glittering glass-like stones mingled with barnacles. And finally, everywhere, long lead boxes swaying in the current. Were they coffins? Into this fabulous tableau entered the mariner, as he scooped some mud off the ocean floor, cupping both hands full of it, displaying it for his dirt. And then it melted away in the water. And within Helen's breast, something died. On the deck, Enola kept watch at the depth gauge at the stern of the boat. Before he had disappeared underwater, the mariner had sternly warned her, "Don't touch anything." And she hadn't. She had just watched as the gauge's needle charted Helen's descent. 20, 30, 40, 70, 80, 90. Finally, the gauge held at 110 meters. Just as Enola was starting to get worried, it began to reverse itself. She sighed, relieved that her friends were coming back home, and she looked toward the water. She could see something down under there, something blue, blurry. Not the cage, but something alive. Sharks. The mariner helped the woman onto the stern, and both caught their breath. "I didn't know," she said, shaking and shaken. "All this time I didn't know there were cities down there." "Nobody knows," he told her, "but me. And now you." That was when she saw the smoker boats in the water, ringing the trimaran. No sign of the child, no smokers on deck. But the rusted Goju's smoker boats were surrounding them. "Can you get us out of here?" she whispered. A commanding voice from below deck bellowed a response. "I'd say there are 2 chances of that." And a one-eyed, bald-headed, grinning madman of a smoker stepped from the cabin. "No way," the smoker chieftain said, "and no how." From behind the smoker chieftain emerged 2 more smokers, one of them the Nord. On the deck lay the mariner's spear gun. The smoker chieftain and his 2 men wore gloating grins, and their eyes were on the mariner and the woman. They apparently hadn't spotted the unattended weapon. The mariner lunged for it, but a powerful hand yanked it from the deck. Then the mariner was on his knees, looking up at the taunting, smiling features of the Nord. "Should have bought me that drink, dirt man," the Nord said. And he yanked the mariner to his feet and shoved him back over by the woman. Smokers began filling the decks of the encircling boats. "Proper introductions first," said the smoker chieftain. "I'm the Deacon." It was a name the mariner was all too familiar with. A name all Waterworld knew and feared. And the smoker chieftain pulled back the off-kilter eye patch goggles to reveal a hideous charred hole where an eye had been, poking his face close to the mariner's, staring at him like a demented cyclops. "Now, I suspect she's somewhere close." The mariner knew who she was. The pirates had clearly come for the child. The woman was trembling. "We could tear the boat apart looking for her," the Deacon was saying. Then, with a smile, the Deacon positioned himself between the mariner and the woman, and lifted both his arms so that one handgun barrel rested against the mariner's temple, and the other against Helen's. "But I'd rather someone just tell me," the Deacon said casually. "I'd hate to have to destroy such an unusual craft." The mariner said nothing. "Here's how we play the game," the Deacon said. "First one that tells me where the kid is lives. The runner-up... Well, actually, there are no runners-ups in this game. Personally," the Deacon whispered to the woman seductively, "I'd much rather dispatch sperm of the devil here." The withering expression Helen cast upon the Deacon almost made the mariner smile. "But I don't think you're going to tell me, are you?" the Deacon said. Then he shrugged and cast his one-eyed countenance the mariner's way. "So come on, fishy," the smoker chieftain said. "What do you say?" The mariner said nothing. With a sweep of one hand, The Deacon pulled back the mariner's hair, exposing the gills. "She's not even your kind," he shouted. "Not that you have a kind." The mariner said nothing. Helen said quickly, "If you tell, he'll still kill us both." The backhand slap the Deacon gave her rang across the ship. "If you don't tell me, I swear to Poseidon I'll torch your boat." Then, looking past the Deacon's gun barrel, he trained his eyes on Helen, and her eyes stared back at him. In their shared silence, the mariner and the woman forged a new bond. "Damn," the Deacon said. The mariner was slipping a hand behind the mast, searching for a loop of the wrist lanyard. Still brandishing a gun in either hand, the Deacon turned to his blonde second-in-command. "Refresh my memory. What happens when neither talks?" The Nord seemed genuinely perplexed. "Never happened before." "All right," the Deacon said. "If they won't tell us where the kid is, we'll just do it now. Kill both of them." And he fired the gun upward twice, exploding the air. The mariner winced, knowing what the result would be. The child came scrambling up out of the cross-arm cavity, screaming, "No! No!" "Oh, so gullible, these children," the Deacon said. "But I do dearly love the innocent little brats. Bring her here." The smoker guard grabbed the child and carried her to the Deacon, dumping her unceremoniously before him. The smoker chieftain tugged down the child's tunic to reveal the tattoo. He cackled, then hauled her up. "Take off that tunic," he said, "and lay her out so we can get a good look at those markings." Several more smokers had boarded, and they followed these instructions. "That mean anything to you?" the Deacon asked the Nord. "No. I can't cipher it out either. We'll do it back on the D's." The Deacon gestured to Enola. "We got what we came for." The Nord glanced toward the mariner and Helen. "What about them? And the boat?" "Torch it." In one swift motion, the mariner looped the enlarged wrist lanyard over the smoker guard's neck and kicked a lever, sending a counterweight plummeting. And the smoker guard rocketed upward, up the mast, caught in the wrong way gallows. The mariner grabbed Helen by the wrist and yanked her along as he ran to the bow and dove over the side, the Nord's gunfire blasting the air they had just vacated, then drilling the water as they plunged down. His hand was guiding her, and she followed his lead under the water, and suddenly they were surfacing inside a recession in the main hull. "Enola's up there," she whispered. "I know. Nothing we can do right now. We have to go under." "How? I can't breathe under there like you." He touched her face. "I'll breathe for us both." Suddenly bullets were triggering down alongside the central hull. They swam deeper as bullets chased them down. But then her air began to give out. "I'm drowning," she thought. The mariner stopped, treading water, and drew Helen to him. It was as if he were kissing her, but it was a kiss of life as he shared air with her. Then they went swimming away together, deep under the water, kicking in tandem, pausing now and then for the mariner to share his air with her in survival kisses. It was dark down there, and cold, but after a while she felt warm. She felt close to this creature, this man. Perhaps an hour later they surfaced far away from the trimaran. It was only a dot on the horizon. But they could see the telltale trail of smoke curling into the sky. They could see, too, the smoker boats pulling away in triumph. "We have to go back," Helen said. "I have to know." The mariner nodded. "We can start now. We'll be there by sunset." Then they were. When they surfaced cautiously, not knowing whether a smoker guard had been left behind, they viewed the smoldering hulk of the once proud trimaran, floating in the sea like a charred corpse. They swam to the wreck and climbed aboard. No sign of the girl. Then she saw it. The box of crayons, its contents a swirl of melted colors on the scorched hull. "Check below deck," she said. "See if they left her." She couldn't make herself say body. "See if she's down there." He nodded and went. She sat, and as a breeze stirred the seared remnants of the trimaran, she could almost hear the song Enola used to sing. "There is a girl that lives in the wind, in the wind, in the wind." He came up shaking his head. They either took her, he said, or dumped her overboard. He had something in his hand. The bottle the drifter had traded him for half an hour of Helen's favors. The ancient yellowed pages were still within. They missed this, he said. Maybe we can barter it for some hydro. With who? That seagull? We have to go on. I can't go on, she said. Not without her, or any hope of dry land. I don't even want to live if there's no hope. There's us, he said, and now she understood. There was affection in those hard eyes. It's funny, she offered. I always thought dry land drifted with the wind. Why did you believe in it so much when others didn't? She gestured to her feet. Because people aren't made for the sea. We've got hands and feet. We're supposed to walk on something solid. She began to weep. I miss the sound of her singing, she said. Do you? He looked away. I miss my boat. You know, Helen said, you're so much better at being alone than I am. I was born on an atoll, he told her quietly. People wanted to kill me. I was a freak. She touched his arm. My mother taught me to read, but she died young. What about your father? My father kept me alive, he said. He used me to dive after fish. Kept me on a lead line. What? He knew if he didn't, I'd never come back. So I stole his boat after I killed him. The wind seemed suddenly colder. I've been on one boat or another ever since, he said. She stroked his face. How old were you? That child's age, he said. Maybe a little older. She leaned forward and very tenderly kissed him on the mouth. He backed away as if burned. I want to try again, she said. She gave him another kiss and moved closer to him, guiding his arms around her. Sunset was turning the sea crimson and gold, and the trimaran was like a stray ember. They lay there together, loving each other, rekindling hope in each other's arms. By the following afternoon they had constructed a raft from the rubble of the ship, and they set out to sea. Helen, a voice called, echoing over the water. Their eyes searched the sea, but saw nothing. Who was talking to them? No, no, no! Out here! And then drifting into view just above them was the cigar-shaped dirigible with its quilt-worn balloon, and sitting in his chair controlling it all, old Gregor. She sprang to her feet. Gregor! Never would have seen you if it had not been for the smoke. Who's that with you? The mariner had risen to his feet. Why, it's Ichthyosapien, Gregor said. Is that really you? The mariner said nothing, but Helen cried, What are you doing here? Looking for survivors from the Atoll attack, he said. The rest of us are on the eastern banks. This is a miracle. Here, grab hold. I'll lower some lines and pull you on. Soon they were climbing up into the dirigible seats that had been designed once upon a time for Helen and Enola. This finally prompted the absent-minded inventor to ask, Oh, dear. It's a child. Where's Enola? Smokers took her, Helen said. They'd have me too if it hadn't been for him. And the mariner, looking a little nervous to be sitting in a boat that rode the sky, was looking wistfully toward his ruined trimaran. In the distance, dots along the horizon gradually revealed themselves as a ragtag cluster of boats, rafted together with gangways between them. The survivors of the smoker raid on Oasis had banded together, rebuilding, beginning a new atoll. I should have stayed with the raft, the mariner said. They won't try to harm you, she said. I'll tell them what you did, how you saved my life. He was shaking his head. I don't want to stay. I just want a boat. Will you take me with you? He looked at her, eyes narrowed. Is that what you want? I want to go after Enola. In one boat? Now she shook her head no. I want to talk them into untying all those boats and going after the smokers, going after Enola. He looked at her a long time, then he sighed. They won't do it. But I have to try. On the deck of a beat-up trawler, the mariner sat by himself, eating a bowl of mush provided by an Atoller woman. Within the trawler, a meeting was being held. His fate was being decided. Once again, he had not been invited to his own trial. Helen had assured him this was not a trial. No one had made any attempt to restrain or chain him, and the voice of authority in New Oasis belonged to an old friend of the mariner's, the Enforcer. I'll see to it you aren't harmed, the Enforcer assured him. The mariner believed the man, and now he waited. In the meantime, he decided that this trawler would do as well as any here, and began removing Atoller belongings, tossing them onto the dock. He didn't want their raggedy things, just the boat. She stood at the window, staring out at the lonely figure of the mariner. Some things never changed. It's not safe to leave him unchained out there, an Atoller man was shouting. A woman said, He's right. We have children here. She faced the group. You needn't bother figuring out what to do with him, she said. He's leaving. How? Another Atoller man said. On one of our boats? Demanded another. She shrugged. You can give him one, or he'll just take one. Your choice. The brawny figure of the Enforcer moved through the group. He's earned that much, and he's free to leave. We have a decision to make, the Enforcer said. Helen has asked that we unlash our boats and set out for the child. She's among smokers, someone said. Let's hear her out, the Enforcer said. Helen knew how important her speech was, to her, to Enola, to tomorrow. The world wasn't created in a great deluge, Helen said. The land was not washed away. It was covered by it. A woman from the back chimed out shrilly, The elders say— They say nothing, Helen clipped her off. They're dead. I'm alive, and I'm here before you to say that I have seen it with my own eyes. There's land right under our keel. There are cities down there, dead ones, but they were once alive. There's land down there. That means there could be land above water, too. Somewhere on the horizon. Where then? A voice called out. Old Gregor sprang up. My friends, he said, I'm convinced Enola carries the way to dry land on her back. I haven't yet solved the puzzle, but I know it is. Without her, I never will. Another Atoller stood. Do we have to listen to this nonsense? Dry land's a hoax. We decided that years ago. Heads were nodding, and murmuring turned to muttering, which the Enforcer silenced to take the vote. But Helen knew, even before the show of hands, what the outcome would be. End of Side 3.
And so there you have it. That is part 3 of the Waterworld audiobook. We began with the Deacon plotting his next move to capture the mariner Helen and Enola, and ended with Helen pleading with the surviving Atollers to go after the smokers and save Enola. Join me in part 4 where the story concludes. But before you go, remember to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to continue along with the rest of the audiobook series. Also, follow the Atoll on Instagram for even more Waterworld content, link in the description below. And so with that, thanks, as always, for joining me at the Atoll.